Maid accidentally enters the billionaire's bathroom and ends up seeing. Welcome to Heartstrings Tales. I'm so glad you're here. At Heartstrings Tales, we share stories that tug at your heart and remind us of the power of kindness and second chances. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment below. I'd love to hear from you. Lily Turner had always prided herself on being punctual, efficient, and careful in her work. As a maid at the prestigious Morehouse estate, she was used to the sprawling mansion, the polished marble floors, and the smell of freshly cut flowers that seemed to linger in the air like a dream. The Morehouse family, one of the wealthiest in the country, had strict rules, and Lily knew how to navigate those rules like clockwork. But what she didn't expect was that one small mistake, one tiny moment of distraction, would change everything. It was a Monday morning when the incident happened. Lily had just finished cleaning the guest bedrooms and was moving on to the master suite. She'd heard that Mr. Alexander Morehouse, the youngest of the billionaire family, was in town for a brief visit. As always, she had a long list of tasks ahead of her, but none of them included running into Mr. Morehouse himself. At least, that's what she had thought. The grand staircase echoed with every footstep as she carefully made her way upstairs, a tray of fresh towels balanced on her arm. She had a strict routine: clean, dust, arrange, and leave. She always made sure to follow the schedule. She had been working here for almost 2 years, and in that time, she had never made a mistake. But today was different. The door to the master bathroom was slightly ajar, just enough to catch her attention. She had a bit of a habit of being a perfectionist, always double-checking every room to make sure nothing was out of place. The bathroom door hadn't been closed all the way, and Lily, assuming someone had forgotten to shut it, gently pushed it open. Her heart skipped a beat. What she saw was completely unexpected. Standing in the middle of the opulent bathroom was none other than Alexander Morehouse, dressed only in a towel, his wet hair dripping with water. He was facing the mirror, looking focused as he adjusted the knot of the towel around his waist. For a moment, Lily stood frozen in the doorway, her breath caught in her chest. Everything she had seen in the past 2 years of working at the Morehouse estate, every polished floor, every piece of fine china, seemed to blur into the background as her eyes locked onto the billionaire standing before her. Alexander Morehouse, the one person she had never expected to encounter like this, was so much more striking in person than the images she had seen in magazines. He was tall, well-built, and undeniably handsome, even in such a casual, private moment. Lily blinked rapidly, her mind racing. She needed to leave. She needed to turn around and pretend she hadn't seen anything, but her feet felt like they were glued to the floor. The awkwardness of the situation was overwhelming, and just as she took a step back, her heel caught on the edge of the expensive marble flooring. The crash of her tray hitting the floor was enough to break the silence. Towels, soap, and a bottle of lotion scattered in all directions as Lily hurriedly bent to pick them up, her face flushing with embarrassment. She felt the air shift around her as Alexander turned toward her, his expression unreadable. "Are you all right?" His voice, deep and calm, filled the space between them, making Lily's heart beat faster. She couldn't look him in the eye, knowing that she had just made the most awkward mistake of her life. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Morehouse," Lily stammered, trying to collect herself. "I didn't mean to intrude. I thought no one was in here." The tension in the air was palpable. Alexander's gaze softened, and for a moment, Lily could have sworn she saw a flicker of amusement in his eyes, but it quickly vanished. "It's fine," he said, though his voice had a hint of surprise. "You can leave the towels. I'll manage." Lily nodded quickly, scrambling to gather the scattered items. Her hands trembled as she worked, the heat of embarrassment rising in her chest. She wanted to disappear, to retreat to the safety of the kitchen or anywhere far from the scene she had just caused. She managed to get the towels in a neat pile, but as she turned to leave, Alexander spoke again. "You don't have to rush off," he said, a touch of warmth in his voice that caught her off guard. "I'm sure you have other things to do." Lily paused for a moment, unsure of what to say. Should she leave immediately, or was it okay to stay? For a moment longer. Her mind raced. The last thing she wanted was to make him feel uncomfortable or make the situation worse. "Thank you, Mr. Morehouse," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. With that, she stepped quickly out of the room, closing the door behind her. Her heart was still pounding in her chest, and her mind was a whirlpool of thoughts. Had she just ruined everything? Was she about to lose her job over one accidental intrusion? She stood in the hallway, her hand resting against the wall as she tried to steady herself. The encounter had shaken her more than she had realized. That was not supposed to happen, she whispered to herself. But what she didn't know was that the encounter was far from over. Lily tried her best to shake off the awkwardness of the encounter with Mr. Alexander Morehouse, but as the day wore on, she couldn't seem to get the image of him out of her mind. The way his broad shoulders had looked beneath the towel, the sound of his voice, everything about the moment played on a loop in her head, distracting her from her work. She had to admit, she'd never thought much about him before. He was a quiet billionaire, mostly known for his business dealings and philanthropic efforts, a man who stayed out of the limelight compared to his flashy older brother, Jacob. But now, Lily's mind kept drifting back to the strange, unspoken tension that had followed their brief exchange. She had expected Alexander to be angry or annoyed, but his reaction had been surprisingly calm. She had prepared herself for a scolding or a reprimand, but instead, he had acted as though it was no big deal. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Lily worked through her usual duties, tidying the estate from top to bottom. She kept herself busy, trying to stay focused and not think about that bathroom or the way Alexander had looked at her. But every time her thoughts wandered, she felt a tug in her chest. What had that moment meant? Was she imagining things? Around mid-afternoon, as Lily was organizing the kitchen, she heard footsteps approaching from the hallway. She froze immediately, recognizing the confident, measured steps of Mr. Morehouse. Her stomach clenched, and before she could react, he was standing in the kitchen doorway. "Ms. Turner," Alexander greeted her, his tone warm, but still formal. "I was hoping to speak with you for a moment." Lily's heart skipped. She quickly wiped her hands on her apron and stood up straight. "Of course, Mr. Morehouse. What can I do?" "For you?" He seemed to hesitate for a split second before he spoke again. "I wanted to apologize for earlier. I didn't mean to make you feel uncomfortable." Lily blinked in surprise. "Apologize? No, I'm the one who should apologize. I should have been more careful." She was flustered now, the memory of the awkwardness flooding back. He raised a hand, as though to stop her from speaking further. "It was an honest mistake," he said. "I just wanted to make sure you didn't think I was upset with you." Lily felt her cheeks flush at the kindness in his voice. Was it possible that she had misunderstood the situation entirely? Maybe it hadn't been as uncomfortable for him as it had been for her. "I really appreciate that," Lily said, her voice softening. "But honestly, I should have been paying more attention. I've been working here for a while, and I've never made a mistake like that." Alexander smiled faintly, and Lily could swear there was a hint of amusement in his eyes. "It happens. We all make mistakes, Miss Turner." He paused, glancing around the kitchen before his gaze returned to her. "In fact, I'm glad it happened. It gave me a chance to meet you. Properly." His voice was gentle, and there was something about it that made Lily feel both calm and unsettled at the same time. Lily's throat tightened. He wasn't angry, but the way he was looking at her was making her feel exposed, like he could see right through her. She knew it was foolish, but she couldn't help feeling a strange connection in that moment. "I appreciate your understanding, Mr. Morehouse," she said quietly. She turned back to the counter to busy herself with an empty dish, trying to mask her nervousness. Alexander didn't move right away. Instead, he stood there for a few moments, watching her with a thoughtful expression. The silence stretched between them before he spoke again. "By the way, I'll be hosting a dinner party this weekend," he said casually. "If you're free, I'd like to invite you to join us as a guest." Lily's head snapped up in surprise. "Me? A guest?" She wasn't sure if she had heard him right. It was one thing to be a maid working for the Morehouse family, but to be invited as a guest to a formal dinner party was, well, it was unthinkable. "Yes," Alexander said, his tone soft but insistent. "You've worked here for a long time, and I think you deserve a chance to enjoy yourself as well. Don't worry, it'll be a small affair, just some close friends and family. No pressure." Lily's mind was racing. She couldn't possibly accept the invitation. She had never imagined being in the same room as the family's high-profile guests, let alone sitting at the same table. She felt out of place, unworthy of such an offer. But Alexander seemed to sense her hesitation. "It's just a casual dinner. If you change your mind, let me know," he said with a smile that made her feel both nervous and strangely at ease. Lily could only nod, still in a state of disbelief. "Thank you, Mr. Morehouse. I'll think about it." With that, Alexander turned and walked away, leaving Lily standing there, her heart still pounding in her chest. She had no idea what to make of it. Was he really offering her a chance to join the elite world he inhabited? Did it mean anything, or was it just a kind gesture? And what did it mean for their interactions going forward? As the day came to a close, Lily found herself lost in thought, her mind spinning. One simple mistake had led to so many questions, and she couldn't help but wonder how this encounter would change everything. Would things ever be the same between her and Alexander? The days that followed were a blur of conflicting emotions for Lily. She found herself caught between the desire to continue living her life quietly and the nagging pull of something more, something she couldn't quite name. The invitation to Alexander Morehouse's dinner party hung over her like an unspoken challenge. She had spent the better part of the week wrestling with herself. On one hand, she was still a maid in his household, part of a world so far removed from the one Alexander occupied. What could she possibly have in common with the people who would attend? On the other hand, there was a voice in her head telling her that maybe, just maybe, this was an opportunity to step outside the box she'd placed herself in, to experience a different side of life she never thought she would. That Saturday morning, Lily found herself standing in front of her mirror, staring at the clothes she had carefully laid out on the bed. She'd never had reason to dress up like this before. Her uniform was always her standard attire, and she was used to it. The thought of wearing something different felt surreal. She had chosen a simple black dress, modest yet elegant, with a delicate lace trim along the neckline. She had borrowed a pair of small black heels from a friend, and as she looked at herself in the reflection, she wondered if she was even doing this for the right reasons. Was she trying to impress Alexander? Was she trying to fit into a world she didn't belong in? Lily shook her head. No, she wasn't trying to impress anyone. She was just curious. She was curious about the life she had always seen from a distance, the life that Alexander seemed to move in so effortlessly. She applied a light layer of makeup, enough to highlight her features without overdoing it. She was still unsure of herself, but she knew that this wasn't just about the dinner. It was about something bigger, the subtle, invisible shift in her world that had happened ever since that awkward moment in the bathroom. At precisely 7 p.m., Lily found herself standing at the front door of the Morehouse estate, a small, tight knot of anxiety in her stomach. She had never been on this side of the house before. The staff usually entered through the side door near the kitchen, a completely different world from the grand entrance that now lay before her. The house was alive with soft music and laughter as she stepped inside. A butler greeted her and handed her a glass of champagne. She felt completely out of place, like a stranger in someone else's story. "Welcome, Ms. Turner," the butler said with a polite nod. "Mr. Morehouse is expecting you. Right this way." Lily barely registered the words as she followed him, down a corridor lined with artwork and expensive vases. Her heart raced with every step. Her shoes clicked sharply against the marble floor, making her feel even more self-conscious. When the butler led her into the grand dining room, she froze. The room was filled with people, elegantly dressed guests in conversation, clinking glasses and laughing. A long, polished wooden table stretched out in the center, surrounded by chairs that seemed so far beyond her reach. At the head of the table, Alexander stood, looking effortlessly at ease in his tailored suit. He spotted her immediately, and his face broke into a warm smile. "Lily, you made it." His voice was genuine, and Lily couldn't help but feel a strange mix of relief and nervousness. She nodded, trying to keep her composure. "Yes, thank you for inviting me." Alexander gestured for her to come closer. "Please join us." He indicated an empty seat next to him, a place that felt both welcoming and intimidating all at once. Lily took the seat, her hands trembling slightly as she adjusted the delicate silverware in front of her. She tried to blend in, tried not to stand out, but the atmosphere was too foreign. The guests were talking about things she didn't understand: high-end investments, art auctions, and extravagant vacations. She nodded politely when addressed, but felt like an outsider in a world that seemed so polished, so different from her own. As dinner progressed, Lily's mind drifted back to that day, the day she had accidentally entered Alexander's bathroom. It felt like everything had changed. In that instant, there was a magnetic pull between them, something unspoken that lingered in the air every time their eyes met. But what did it mean? Was it just the awkwardness of that moment, or was there something deeper at play? During the main course, Alexander's voice cut through the chatter. "Lily," he said, drawing her attention, "tell us about how you ended up working at the estate. I'm curious." All eyes turned to her, and she felt a surge of heat rush to her face. She hadn't expected to be put on the spot like this. She took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. "It wasn't something I planned," she said, her voice a little shaky. "I needed a job, and this place was hiring. I've been here for almost 2 years now, and it's been a good experience." Her words felt small in comparison to the grandiosity of the room, but Alexander seemed to be listening intently, his gaze never wavering. The other guests nodded politely, but Lily could sense a subtle shift in the energy. Was it possible they were starting to see her as something more than just the maid? After a few more questions and polite exchanges, Alexander stood and raised his glass. "I'm glad we could all gather tonight. I believe everyone here has something to offer, and I'm happy to have such an interesting and diverse group of people with us." Lily wasn't sure if the comment was meant for her, but something in his tone made her feel as though he was speaking directly to her. She could feel the weight of his gaze across the table, like a silent understanding had formed between them. The rest of the evening blurred by, and eventually, guests began to filter out, leaving the table to return to the comfort of their homes. Lily lingered at the table, trying to collect herself before she excused herself to leave. As she stood to go, Alexander caught her arm lightly. "Lily," he said, his voice low, "thank you for coming. I hope this wasn't too much. I'd like to talk to you more if you're up for it." She met his gaze, heart pounding in her chest. Was this just polite conversation, or was there something more? She couldn't tell, but as she looked into his eyes, she knew one thing for certain: nothing would ever be the same again. The following week felt like a whirlwind to Lily. She had returned to her usual duties at the Morehouse estate, but the events of the dinner party were still fresh in her mind. That night, after the guests had left and the house had settled back into its usual quiet, Lily found herself lying awake, replaying the evening over and over again in her head. She couldn't quite explain what had happened between her and Alexander, but something had undeniably shifted. It wasn't just his invitation to the dinner or his warmth during their conversation. It was the way he had looked at her. The way he had seen her, not just as the maid, but as someone with her own worth, her own value. Every time their eyes had met across the table, Lily had felt that same subtle, unspoken connection. There was an intensity there, something that pulled at her heartstrings, yet also frightened her. She wasn't naive. She knew this could never lead anywhere. She was just a maid, after all. The gulf between their worlds was too vast, and Alexander's life was too different from hers. He was a billionaire, the heir to a fortune, living a life filled with luxury and expectation. She, on the other hand, was just a girl who had come from a humble background, doing her best to make ends meet. But despite her reservations, Lily couldn't deny the pull she felt when she saw him. It was as though a part of her had come alive, like something inside her had been awakened. She found herself wondering if he felt it too, though she wasn't sure how to even begin asking. On Thursday afternoon, as Lily was finishing her usual rounds, she received a surprise. One of the house staff came to find her in the kitchen, her face a little flushed with excitement. "Miss Turner, Mr. Morehouse asked for you. He wants to speak. With you in his office." Lily's heart skipped in her chest. She hadn't expected to see Alexander so soon after the dinner party. "Is everything all right?" she asked, trying to mask her sudden anxiety. The staff member nodded. "He said it was nothing urgent, just wanted to talk." Lily took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. She hadn't prepared for this moment. She was used to cleaning up after the Morehouse family, making sure everything was in place, but speaking to Alexander outside of a casual encounter was a whole different story. Still, she had no choice but to go. As she walked through the grand hallway, her mind raced. What could he want to talk about? Was it about the dinner party? Had she done something wrong? She found herself running through the events of the past few days, trying to make sense of any possible reason he might need to speak with her. When she reached his office, the door was slightly ajar. She knocked gently before pushing it open. "Mr. Morehouse," she called out, trying to keep her voice steady. Alexander looked up from his desk, his expression warm and inviting. "Lily, come in. Please, have a seat." He gestured to the chair opposite his desk. Lily hesitated for a moment, then stepped inside and sat down. Her hands folded neatly in her lap. She couldn't help but feel a flutter of nerves as she waited for him to speak. He studied her for a moment, his gaze lingering as if he were trying to read her thoughts. "I hope I'm not interrupting your work," he began, breaking the silence. "No, of course not," Lily said, shaking her head. "I was just finishing up." Alexander nodded, his expression thoughtful. "I wanted to talk to you about something I've been thinking about since the dinner." Lily's heart skipped a beat. "What about the dinner?" she asked, trying to keep her voice neutral, though she couldn't help but feel the weight of his words. "I noticed you seemed a little uncomfortable," he said, his voice soft and measured. "And I know this is probably a lot for you, coming into my world like that. The wealth, the people, the expectations. I want you to know that it's perfectly all right to feel out of place. I don't want you to think that you have to be someone you're not, just to fit in." Lily blinked, taken aback by his understanding. I wasn't sure what to expect," she admitted, her voice quiet. "I've never been in a setting like that before, but I appreciate your kindness." Alexander leaned forward, his elbows resting on the desk, and his gaze softened. "Lily, you don't have to be anyone else to be here. You belong just as much as anyone else. And I'm not asking you to change for me or anyone else. I just want you to feel comfortable, whether you're working here or just enjoying a meal with us." Lily swallowed hard, feeling something stir in her chest. His words, His reassurance felt genuine, and for a moment, she allowed herself to believe it. But then doubt crept in. Was this just politeness? Was he offering her this comfort because he felt sorry for her? Before she could voice any of her doubts, Alexander continued. I've been thinking too that I'd like to spend more time with you, if you're open to it. I know this may seem sudden, but I feel there's something different about you. Something I can't quite explain. Lily's breath caught in her throat. Mr. Morehouse, Please, call me Alexander, he interrupted gently, his voice carrying a warmth that seemed to erase the distance between them. She nodded, unsure of what to say next. Alexander wasn't acting like the rich, aloof billionaire she had expected. Instead, he was showing her a side of him that felt real, human, and grounded. But Lily still couldn't shake the fear that this was all too much, too fast, too sudden. She had never imagined herself in this kind of situation, and she wasn't sure if she was ready for it. I think you're a lot more than you realize, Lily, Alexander said, his tone low, sincere. And I'd like to get to know you better, if you'll let me. His words lingered in the air between them, carrying a weight that made Lily's heart race. She could feel the tension building, the unspoken connection between them becoming impossible to ignore. But was she ready for this? Was she ready to cross the line from the world she knew into a world of uncertainty and unknowns? For a long moment, Lily didn't speak. She simply sat there, her heart in her throat, caught between the life she had known and the unexpected path that was opening up before her. Lily's mind raced as she sat there in Alexander's office, the weight of his words hanging in the air between them. The very thought of spending more time with him, of stepping into a world she had always watched from a distance, was both thrilling and terrifying. She had spent so many years accepting her place as a maid, as someone who didn't belong in the world of luxury and wealth that the Morehouse family inhabited. But now, here she was, being offered something she had never dared to dream of. She wanted to say something, to give him an answer, but the words felt caught in her throat. She had been raised to believe that people like Alexander, people with money and power, were out of reach. People like her, people from humble backgrounds, didn't cross paths with billionaires, didn't get invited to dinners, didn't get offered the chance to spend time together in the way he was suggesting. And yet, he was looking at her as if she was someone he wanted to get to know. Not just as an employee, not as a maid, but as Lily, a person with thoughts, feelings, and desires just like his. Her breath caught as she stared at him, trying to find a way to speak, to express the whirlwind of emotions that were flooding her. But she felt vulnerable, unsure of how much she should reveal. Could she let herself hope for something beyond the life she knew? Could she dare to trust that someone like Alexander could see her for who she truly was? I don't want to pressure. You, Alexander's voice softened, pulling Lily out of her thoughts. Take your time to think about it. I'm not asking for anything beyond just getting to know you better. But I want you to know that I'm interested in you, Lily. Not just because you work for me, but because I see something in you that's real. The sincerity in his voice melted away the last of her hesitation. There was no pretense in his words, no ulterior motive. He wasn't asking for her to change, to fit into a world that wasn't hers. He was simply asking for her company, for her to allow herself to be seen as more than just a maid. Lily let out a shaky breath and finally found her voice. I don't know what to say. I've never been in a situation like this before. Her voice was barely above a whisper, as if she feared the answer would shatter the fragile hope building inside her. I don't know if I belong in your world. I don't know if I'm enough. Alexander's gaze softened, and he leaned forward slightly, as though trying to bridge the gap between them. Lily, you don't need to be enough for anyone. You are enough just as you are. I don't want you to think of this as some kind of favor or something that makes you feel indebted. I simply want to get to know you, if that's something you'd like too. The sincerity in his eyes, the honesty and openness, made something inside Lily shift. Her heart pounded in her chest, and she realized that the walls she had built around herself, the walls she had constructed for years to keep her distance from this world, were starting to crumble. She had spent so long hiding behind those walls, convincing herself that her place was here, that she belonged in this world of duty and routine. But what if there was more to her life than that? What if this moment, this offer, was a chance for something new? For the first time in a long while, Lily allowed herself to believe that there could be more to her story. I'd like that, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. I'd like to get to know you too. Alexander's expression softened into a smile, and in that moment, Lily saw something in his eyes, something that reflected the same uncertainty she felt, but also a shared desire to step beyond what they knew, beyond the boundaries of their different worlds. He stood up from behind his desk and walked over to where she sat. His movements were slow, deliberate, as though he was giving her the space to process what was happening. You don't have to make any decisions right now, he said gently. But I hope that, little by little, we can build something real. Not because of your job or mine, but just because of who we are. Lily nodded, her heart racing. She felt a weight lift off her shoulders, a sense of freedom she hadn't known she was craving. For so long she had played her part, kept to the shadows, and lived within the confines of her own expectations. But now, something was different. She wasn't just the maid. She wasn't just someone meant to stay in the background. In Alexander's eyes, she was someone worth knowing, someone worth taking a chance on. As she stood up to leave, her heart was no longer heavy with uncertainty. It was filled with something else, something she hadn't allowed herself to feel before. Hope. She didn't know where this would lead, and part of her was still unsure of what it all meant. But for the first time, she wasn't afraid of what might come next. The path ahead wasn't clear, but she was no longer walking it alone, and maybe, just maybe, that was enough. Thank you for watching. If you liked this story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more heartwarming tales.